the way, the BBC, which was at one time a great network, has now become one of the main defenders of the Bush-Cheney conspiracy theory about 9/11. Jennings had told his story in an interview for the producers of Loose Change Final Cut, for which I happen to be the script consultant, so I know something about what went on behind the scenes. Before the film was released, Jennings begged Dylan Avery, the main maker of the film, to delete his interview from the film for fear that he would lose his job. Avery agreed. But later, Jennings gave an interview for the BBC, told the same story, but the BBC put his story within the official timeline. And so they made it appear as if what Jennings called a big explosion was just, as the British narrator put it, just debris from a falling skyscraper. The BBC even made it seem as if Jennings was all by himself, rather than accompanied by Hess, even though Jennings kept saying, "We went down the stairs, and then we climbed back up to the 8th floor." They made it seem as if Jennings was all by himself. This BBC program was aired in July of 2008. NIST, whose timeline the BBC had followed, released the first draft, this draft for public comment, on Building 7 the following month, August of 2008. Shortly before this release, evidently only 2 days before, Barry Jennings, who was 53 years old, appeared to have died mysteriously. Those who have tried to find out why he died couldn't get no answer, other than that he died in a hospital. Whatever the cause of his death, it was certainly convenient. He was not around to be interviewed again, perhaps by the Loose Change producers, after the NIST report appeared. And the BBC was able to put out a new version of its report on Building 7, this time including Michael Hess, who since 2002 had been the vice chairman of Rudy Giuliani's consulting business. Not surprisingly, Hess supported the official timeline. The BBC made much of this, saying, well, conspiracy theorists have said we distorted Jennings' timeline. But Michael Hess, who was there, confirms that we got the timeline right, that the so-called explosion was really just debris from the falling North Tower. To see the falsity of that timeline, one only has to look at the interview of Jennings by the Loose Change producers, which you can now see on the internet. Look under Barry Jennings Uncut. The timely and mysterious death of Jennings, moreover, may well indicate just how threatening the truth about Building 7 is to the official conspiracy theory about 9/11. In any case, I will point out one more way in which Building 7 has proved to be the Achilles heel of the Bush-Cheney administration's conspiracy theory about 9/11. I mentioned earlier that Building 7 came down in virtual freefall. In the first draft of its report, which was issued in August of last year, NIST claimed that the collapse took far longer than would a freefall collapse. This was very important to NIST because the 9/11 Truth Movement had been saying all along, Building 7 came down in freefall or virtual freefall. And NIST said, oh, no, 40% slower than freefall, not really close. It also explained why NIST did, given its theory, which is a theory of progressive collapse, absolute free fall would have been impossible. But David Chandler, a high school physics teacher in the United States, produced a video showing that the building came down in absolute free fall for over 2 seconds. Now, absolute free fall means that if you had dropped a brick off the side of the building, at the same time the building started to collapse, the brick and the roof line would have descended at the same acceleration. They would have accelerated simultaneously. That would mean that there was absolutely nothing, no steel, no concrete, no nothing, stopping or delaying, slowing down the fall of the top part of the building. That means that all 82 steel columns had to disappear. They couldn't be giving any resistance whatsoever. Besides putting his video on the internet, Chandler confronted NIST with his evidence at a public meeting which was broadcast live. So there was no way that NIST could hide what he had revealed. In its final report, which came out in November, NIST rather amazingly admitted that Building 7 came down in absolute free fall for 2.25 seconds. But it had not changed its theory, which says that free fall is impossible. So you had an absolute contradiction in this final report between its admission of the empirical fact of absolute free fall and a theory of progressive collapse that rules out absolute free fall. This contradiction can be seen as the ultimate self-destruction of the official conspiracy theory about what happened in New York on 9/11, which says that Muslim terrorists brought down 3 high-rise buildings at free fall speed by crashing planes into 2 of them. I will conclude by addressing members of the 9/11 Truth movement, both old members and any new members that this lecture may have created. I'm an optimist. Rather than letting up on our efforts to get the truth about 9/11 revealed, now is the time to work even harder. Jens mentioned in the introduction that my latest book, The New Pearl Harbor Revisited, was named Pick of the Week in November of last year by Publishers Weekly. Publishers Weekly is, in the English-speaking world, the Bible for book stores and librarians. It tells them of the thousands of books that are published every week, which ones are worth getting. In 2004, it panned my New Pearl Harbor, calling it ridiculous, absurd conspiracy theory. When I put out my second book on the 9/11 Commission report, it said essentially the same thing. But in 2008, it named my book as one of the 51 best books of the year. That is a remarkable cultural shift. So I tell this story not just to brag, but that too, but to point out that something remarkable has happened. Publishers Weekly relies on its prestige. It would do nothing to endanger its reputation. In 2004, 2005, it would not have dared to say such a thing about my books, to say that these books that say that 9/11 was an inside job are good books, among some of the best books of the year. But in 2008, obviously they would have had a meeting. They would have debated, do we dare do